We are so back.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And we are back. Well, kind of. We're at another step towards being back. As my dear friend Brian Fisher would say, we are almost so back. We're right there. Pitchers and catchers report today. If you're listening in the morning, during your morning routine, you're headed to work, you know what? Look at that. Look at that sunrise a little bit brighter today. All right. There's going to be some gloves popping, some ground balls being taken, some fly balls being shagged. There's going to be some batting practice taken. It is a great day. Pitchers and catchers report Wednesday. There's probably not going to be too much BP with pitchers and catchers reporting, but half of the fun of pitchers and catchers reporting in today's day and age is just like being on social media and seeing all the videos that are posted. Like, you just see everybody back in the clubhouse. You see some people throw like light soft toss, right? Like it's not a heavy workout day, obviously, but there's a handful of guys that have already been there. Tarek Skubal and Jake Rogers have already been there for a while now. Jack Flaherty's been there for a little bit. Kenta Maeda's been there for a while, which is good because last year Maeda was one of the guys that didn't throw too much during the offseason and then came in right on the day of. So good to see him get there rather a little bit early as well. Just it's such a great day. The first step towards baseball being back is pitchers and catchers reporting. We are going to do an evergreen episode. Evergreen, that's not right. We're going to do an annual episode. We're going to do an episode we do every single year when pitchers and catchers report, or at least around if there's no other big news, and talk about the biggest storylines for the Detroit Tigers this camp and this spring training. Now, this is not necessarily the biggest questions I have of the 2025 Detroit Tigers. I want to differentiate that and really draw that line in the sand because those are two very different things in my head. For instance, if I had to throw out an example, the catching position this year is not a question mark in spring training that I have whatsoever. I am almost certain, barring complete catastrophe, it is going to be Dingler and Rogers behind the dish for your Detroit Tigers on opening day in 2025. However, I do have serious questions about whether that is a long-term catching solution. And in the year 2025, if either of them or both of them are going to be able to hit a baseball consistently, right? So that is the kind of a good example of again, the difference between a spring training question. I don't have any questions about catching in camp and who's going to make the team, but it is maybe a question in 2025. So let's talk about the biggest storylines, the biggest things that I'm watching out for in spring training. I also want to say pretty much all of our fantastic beat writers in this city do an article similar to this or exactly the same as this around this time every year. So go support all of their work. Go read all of, the storylines they're looking for. Maybe some of them will be the same. I'm sure a lot of them will, but good to get as much Tigers content as you possibly can. I want to start off with the starting rotation. And the reason why is because, to me, maybe not the biggest question, but the most exciting part of spring training is going to be Jackson Jobe competing for a spot in the Detroit Tigers rotation for opening day. How is that not instantly the most exciting, just, again, maybe not exactly by definition the biggest, but like, how is that not the most exciting storyline to follow? This guy was, after Skeens got promoted and officially lost prospect status, this guy was, by some publications, the best pitching prospect in the entire sport. And the 5th spot in the Tigers rotation is up for grabs. And he debuted last season. So he's hopefully got his sea legs under him a little bit and has debuted. It's not like he would just be getting thrown right into the fire. I think this is easily the most fun storyline in spring. Now, it's not just, Jobe or like nobody. There is a handful of guys that are all trying to compete and are vying for that 5th spot in the rotation. The top 4 we already know. In some order, it's going to be Skubal, Flaherty, Olsen, Cobb. I would imagine that is the order, but we'll see how spring shakes out. 5 is either going to be Jobe, Casey Mize, Brant Herter, even like Sawyer Gibson Long is back from injury. I don't think he's going to make it, but like he certainly is going to be back and healthy this year. Kenta Maeda is still under contract and was signed to be a starting pitcher, is getting paid over $12 million this year. Ty Madden debuted last year. Matt Manning was like legitimately I would have called him a betting favorite to be in the rotation this time last year. And now is really an afterthought to a lot of people. I think we'll see how he looks in spring. And then Cater Montero had like the 3rd, 4th most starts on the team last year. His hat is certainly going to be thrown in that ring as well. So you have all of those guys. That's how many people I just mentioned? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 guys. You have like 2.5 full rotations of guys that could be major league starting pitchers. Now, again, all eyes are going to be on Jobe, and I've gone back and forth a lot on this over the winter, rather. And if you're an everydayer and have listened to every show or close to every show, you're aware of this. I have really gone from, at the end of last year, I was like, he's going to make the rotation. Then in the winter, I was like, probably not. And then a few weeks ago, I was like, it kind of sounds like the Tigers really want him to make the rotation. And then a little bit more recently, rather, I kind of went back to they might just give it to Mize and have Jobe, start off in the minors. They can manipulate the service time a little bit, yada, yada. But like he already debuted. Like he already made his major league debut last year. And I think they did that for a reason. They didn't just do that for fun down the stretch. Like they did that to help him get acclimated to the major league level, short, 1-2 inning relief appearances. And I think that is undoubtedly one of the biggest stories of spring. Another cool thing, Evan Petzold of The Freep put out an article talking about how Jackson Jobe added 2 pitches this offseason, try to help him attack hitters better and hopefully induce some more swing and miss, which he weirdly, I guess it's technically struggled. He didn't get a lot of swing and miss in his very, very short major league stint at the end of last season. I don't think anyone is even remotely worried about that. Like he has stuff that dances. He'll be fine. But he added a sinker, and there was a video going around of him throwing like a 100-mile-an-hour sinker, then a curveball, kind of a sweeper type of pitch. And obviously all of his stuff breaks and just spins a ton. And if that is part of his arsenal, he's maybe got better, which is pretty hard to do given how good his stuff already was last season. So we'll see how he looks. The biggest things I'm looking for, and if you were to ask me, what would separate Jobe, what would kind of guarantee Jackson Jobe a spot in this rotation, I think it's limiting walks more than anything else. The swing and miss will come, and his stuff is so good that if he is just around the strike zone, he will be an effective major league pitcher. And he was so good. He was elite at not allowing walks in the minor leagues. Especially up until AAA. And so I think that if he can just keep that trend going and just not beat himself and not, be, again, just around the strike zone, I think he's probably SP5 maybe even 4, depending on how Alex Cobb looks, going into opening day. And there's a lot of really fun guys ahead of him in that rotation that can kind of mentor him and teach him along the way. So that's the most fun storyline, I think. Let's talk about all of the other great storylines and stories, and I'm going to say stories a billion times, apparently, to watch this spring training. We will do that right after this. Got to talk to you all today about our new friends over at Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. I know that's kind of sacrilegious to some people, but it's the perfect grab and go snack. My roommate and I love them. My stepbrother and I always go through a ton of pistachios on busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk or on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell, that's to get that satisfying crunch. Don't worry, the in-shell options are a classic favorite as well. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. What a sentence that is. We are fired up. What an absolute bar. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we start talking about news and notes and storylines from Tigers spring camp. So today, though, as pitchers and catchers report, we are talking about the biggest storylines and the biggest things that I'm looking for and that I think the fan base is really looking for in this camp and in this spring training. Another big one for me is going to be shortstop in general. I think a lot of people are kind of already leaning toward this is going to be some combination of Javi and Sweeney platoon. I am interested if there's anything Javi can do to change that, or if there's anything Trey Sweeney can do to change that in either direction. Trey Sweeney, for as much as he was an upgrade over Javi Baez down the stretch, certainly, especially at the plate, is not going to be as good of a defender as Javi in terms of range. Hopefully he can cut down on the throwing errors maybe. But he still does, like Sweeney swung and missed a lot and struck out a lot. And I don't think that's going to necessarily change. I think that's probably going to be what he always is. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be an effective, good major league shortstop. There's plenty of guys out there that have very long, good careers and strike out at a higher clip than average. But I'm interested in this first, Tiger spring training for Sweeney, this first presumably full season in the majors for him. What kind of production he needs to have to just completely get Javi out of the question, or out of the picture, I guess I should say. And on the flip side of that, is there anything Javi can do to prevent maybe him fizzling out and not making it through the season on the roster or something like that? Now, again, this one's a little bit smaller than like the Jackson Jobe, but like SP5 is just up for grabs, right? Shortstop is presumably going to be a righty-lefty platoon. You have 2 shortstops, one's a lefty, one's a righty. Neither are good enough in their own offensively to justify playing 162 games, at least offensively. So like that's kind of the writing is on the wall there. But that is obviously a question that a lot of people have as well. Another one is Torkelson's role, and I want to make sure that I'm wording that correctly. I don't have much of a question surrounding first base. Unless Colt Keith completely crashes and burns, he is the first baseman going forward, right? Now, if we're 2 weeks into spring training and Colt Keith looks absolutely lost at first, then obviously that question is going to start being had, and we're going to start having that conversation a lot more. But as of right now, as of February 12th, when pitchers and catchers report, I'm never going to get tired of saying that. I'm just going to keep saying, today's the day. But as of today, I don't have much of a question of what first base is going to look like. My bigger question is, what is Torkelson going to look like this year? Is he going to hit better in spring training? And even if I guess my biggest question is simply, let's say he's literally the best hitter on the team in spring training. What do you do with him? And I know there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what he does. He's starting out the season in AAA. You say that, and I understand you saying that. But if he legitimately plays a full month of spring ball and is hitting, 400 with 5 homers, I have a hard time believing you're going to feel the same way actually in the moment. It's one thing to predict a thought. It's another one to be in that actual situation and still kind of hold to that opinion. And I really think that it becomes wildly different. Now, we've been fooled plenty, and I am not sure that there's anything he can do in spring training to guarantee himself a major league roster spot. I'm really not. We will do our first roster projection 1.0. We'll end up doing a few of them from now until opening day at some point, either at the end of this week or beginning of next week. And I mean, spoilers, Torkelson's not going to be in my 1.0. Again, we'll see how the spring plays out, injuries and whatnot. But I think that most people are probably there with me. But is his performance in spring actually going to determine where he starts off, or is it just predetermined? I guess is my biggest point, in the way that I can articulate that better than I just spent 3 minutes trying to do. Another big one for me is Wenceel Perez. Wenceel Perez is one of the biggest question marks on the whole roster for me, not because I don't think that he's a professional, major league caliber hitter, because I think he is. But I think that he probably has the most to gain or lose if Bregman were to sign with the Detroit Tigers. Because think about it. If Bregman isn't a Tiger, then Vierling's going to have to play a lot of third. And you're going to need a little bit more of a solidified corner outfielder that you can play, this person in the corner outfield some days and keep Vierling in the lineup because he has to play third base that day, right? Which opens the door. Obviously, the choice is Wenceel Perez then. If they do sign Bregman, then Vierling kind of just becomes that, and he's the fourth outfielder. And he can play all 3 outfield positions, which I'm sure AJ is going to love as well. And I think that then, honestly, like, it's one of either McKinstry, Ibanez, Wenceel Perez is probably the odd man out then if they sign Bregman. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to play for the Detroit Tigers this year. Even if they do sign Bregman, he absolutely will. Injuries are going to happen, whatnot. He's going to get called up at some point, like whatever. But I think that he, outside of just like Vierling's playing time, which obviously is the most impacted thing if they sign Bregman, and then Jace Young, I guess, indirectly, he is one of the most impacted players on this roster by Bregman's decision as well. So something to keep out for. I just mentioned third base. Let's talk about third. Then we're going to move to the pitching side of things, talk about some questions I have in the bullpen. We'll do that and more right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate you all for tuning in, as always. So third base is obviously one of the biggest question marks. I think if you were to pinpoint a biggest question going into camp and going into spring training, it is almost certainly third base. You could argue SP5, right, the last spot in the starting rotation. You could argue maybe like the Torkelson first base thing, maybe, but like I don't really think so. You could argue how the bullpen shakes out, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Who's going to be maybe like the closer, because AJ Hinch hates that word. But like, I really do think that the biggest question the fan base wide has for this team as camp begins is, what is third base going to look like in 2025? As it stands right now, I would put my money on Matt Vierling getting a majority of the playing time, Winfield Perez making the roster, and then Andy Ibanez, Zach McKinstry, filling in at third base whenever they need, similar to last year. Excuse me. Jace Young is obviously the biggest question mark and the biggest, piece to this puzzle. If Jace Young hits like he did last season and doesn't look like he has improved a significant amount from last year when he did not hit very well, albeit with an injured wrist, and if the defense doesn't look like it's taken a big step in the right direction, then he will start off the season in Toledo, and Matt Vierling will be your starting third baseman on opening day. If Jace Young goes into spring, hits his first home run in an Old English D, and is crushing the ball and maybe looks a little bit lighter on his feet over at third, maybe the arm is a little bit better. It's not going to get, he's never going to have a cannon over there, but like if he looks more comfortable at third and looks better there, then you could be talking about more of a platoon situation where it's, Vierling against lefties and maybe playing some corner outfield still, and then Jace Young against righties. But a lot of that is obviously going to be determined based on where Alex Bregman ends up. But I do think that third base in general, I want to make this clear too. A lot of people, when asking about the Bregman situation, are, Bregman or bust. I understand that from a what free agents are available perspective, right? Like there's nobody else in the free agent market I really want outside of Bregman. That being said, I don't think like the season is over if the Tigers don't get Bregman. Like they made the ALD game 5 of the ALDS without him last year, and they added other pieces over the offseason. Like this isn't they need Bregman in order to take a step forward or be a better team. If Jace Young hits as well as it was once believed that he's going to hit, if Matt Vierling plays as well as he did last year, maybe even takes a step forward, there are plenty of other reasons. Jace Young was a top 100 prospect at one point in all of baseball. Like there are certainly things that can happen that would lead the Tigers to success and to where the fan base wants them to be without getting Bregman. Bregman's just a really good player and would instantly make this team better, and kind of takes maybe third base will be good, maybe it won't. It just will be. And that is why, obviously, I would be in favor of him, as I've made clear this winter, and I know a lot of other people would too. But I think third base, even if Bregman signs with the Cubs tomorrow, I think that is going to continue to be one of the biggest storylines, because there's a reality in which Vierling's the everyday starter. There's a reality where it's a platoon. There's a reality in which Jace Young is getting, like we talked about on Pacoda Day, right? Like where Jace Young is getting 60 to 65% of the plate appearances there, and everything in between. There's a world in which Jace Young doesn't even make the team, even if we don't get Bregman. He still doesn't make the team, right? Like if he really struggles and looks like he did at the plate last year. So a lot of different possibilities. And still, this is like 3 years running, maybe longer. Third base continues to just be really, since Candelario left, a massive question mark for this organization. When talking about the bullpen, there's two questions I have, and they kind of cover most of what a bullpen is. So not very creative questions, but there are two questions I have. One is, who's going to be the highest leverage reliever on opening day? We don't use the word closer here out of respect of AJ Hinch, who hates the term closer. So I'm gonna grant AJ his wishes here and his desires, and not use the term closer here. But who is going to be the highest leverage reliever? Early on last year it was Jason Foley. Then it wasn't. Then it kind of was again at the end of the season, and then it really was just kind of by committee down the stretch during the pitching chaos thing. So you go out, you get Tommy Kahnle, you still have Foley, You still have Bo Brisky. And I think one of the most fascinating, not really talked about a ton, at least in a media sense from what I've seen, question marks going into this spring, how quickly we forget the guy who was the de facto closer for almost 2 years is healthy again in Alex Lang. And I think that he also is going to have his hat at least thrown into that ring. If he is filling the strike zone, which I don't think is really possible, if he's even near the strike zone on a consistent basis, this guy is not only going to be in the Tigers bullpen, but is going to be a back end of the bullpen type of guy. So you have those 4 names that I think are really going to make a push for that highest leverage reliever spot. And then the flip side of that is who's going to be the long relief options. Right, we know that like Tyler Holton's going to be just a dog and throw whatever 80 innings out of the pen and be a multi-inning reliever and just be awesome because I love him. But like, and you have a few other guys that kind of fit that criteria. But you also have a ton of starting pitchers, and we kind of bookmarked the show here. We started with starting pitcher. We're going to end with relievers, but kind of recycle back to that starting pitcher conversation. Only one person is going to get the 5th spot in the rotation. They hated the idea of a 6-man rotation last year. I can't imagine that that's going to change too dramatically this year, but we'll see what happens when the beat writers get their hands on, Harris and Hinch and are able to ask them some questions. I think that when the dust settles, let's say it's Jobe or Mize or whoever, then you still have 7 other starting pitchers or multi-inning pitchers at your disposal. Which one of those are going to be the long, kind of like the swingmen, like what Tyler Alexander used to be for this team? Who are those guys going to be? Is Kenta Maeda going to be a multi-inning reliever? Evan Petzold was asking if Kenta Maeda is even going to make the team, right? Ty Madden was that multi-inning guy down the stretch last year and was kind of an opener at points. Brant Herter was phenomenal. Sawyer Gibson-Long, like I mentioned, healthy again. Great to see. If Jackson Jobe gets the 5th spot in the rotation, is Casey Mize a reliever? I'd have to check. I'll do a full, I usually make a spreadsheet for the roster projections to highlight how many options each of these guys have left. Like, what do you do with Casey Mize if he doesn't take the 5th spot in the rotation? Is that a multi-inning reliever type of profile? Not really from what we've seen. He doesn't really strike people out. Matt Manning. Is there a world where he could be a multi-inning reliever with his inconsistent fastball that can be 92 miles an hour, 91 miles an hour one moment, and then 98 the next? Cater Montero, a ton of starts last year. I think he actually could have a reliever profile in the majors. I love Cater Montero. He can kind of do anything. So there's a lot of questions surrounding that bullpen as well. And then not on the roster, this is kind of cheating, but we'll end on just, are the Tigers going to sign Bregman? That continues to be obviously one of the biggest storylines in all of baseball. It's the latest report is that it's down to 3 teams, the Red Sox, the Tigers, and the Cubs. There's some Red Sox people that are saying that the Red Sox are maybe shifting their focus to Arenado. I'll believe it when I see it. I've heard about all of these teams shifting their focus to a million different people and then coming back. I'm done with it. We'll see what happens. I know. I think it was Buster Only said maybe they talked about it on an MLB Hot Stove and MLB Network as well. That they expect him to sign by the end of the week. Well, we heard that in December of 2024 too, and like that. Now we're pitchers and catchers are reporting and we still don't have an answer. So we will see. But if I had to guess right now, I'd say he ends up in Chicago on the north side with the Cubs. But it really sounds like the Tigers are in that top 2 at worst 3 for his services. And we'll see how that plays out. Thanks for being Locked On Tigers, your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we start talking about news and notes from camp, and we keep our preseason train rolling. We're going to have some player previews starting up here soon. We got roster projections starting here soon. We are so back. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.